So I just hit record.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Fenton, and I'm here with my best friend of over 30 years and co-author of 7 novels, Lisa Steinke. Our latest, How to Save a Life, is a dark, heart-pounding love story with a Groundhog Day twist. And we're so excited that you're here, and you can buy our books or any books that we talk about today at Warwick's, who we're partnering with for this couch surfing event. Julie, take it away.
Take it away. We'll be like the squares. Here I am. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Liz. And Aimee, thank you for being here. We're so excited for this conversation tonight. The butterfly effect, or the butterfly lampshade. Oh, I knew I was going to mess that up, Aimee. Sorry about that.
No, it preceded me.
Anyway, so I will be putting this in the link. I'll put Liz and Lisa's book in the link. Just wanted to tell people a little bit about Warwick's. For those of you that are joining us from out of San Diego, I know I have some people that hear me say this every week, so apologies to you on that. We're located in La Jolla, San Diego. I just found out Aimee came to Warwick's when she was it UCSD or USD? UCSD?
UCSD.
Yeah, so she's a Warwick shopper too, so we love that. We're actually open for business. What's that? Aimee?
All the tables, there was like many, it was large and a lot of tables.
A lot of tables, and then on the other side is like all the gifts and the jewelry and the office supplies and all of the good stuff over there. So anyways, we're open for business. Social distancing, mask wearing required, but if you need to come in and browse for a book, we'd love for you to come in. But like I always like to say, any way that you can get a book, you can get it from Warwick. So you can order online, you can call us. We'll ship it to you. If you live in La Jolla, we'll drive it to your house. So like, and the other side of the store, there's lots of good stuff there too. So Liz and Lisa, thank you again for doing this. We couldn't do this couch surfing without you two. So with that, have a great conversation and off to you.
Well, thank you. Well, we're so excited that you're here. Now, Lisa's in a new location this week, and her Wi-Fi is a little spotty. So I'm just going to put it out there. If she pauses, I will jump in and take over. But we'll give it a shot, Lisa. Your face is still moving over here. So.
Okay, because it just happened again a second ago. So I think you're going to have to probably jump in.
Okay.
It's happening now on my end too.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask the questions then. All right. But first, I want to tell you about Aimee. And Aimee, like as I said, we're so excited. Such a pleasure to have you here tonight. Aimee is the author of 6 books: The Girl in the Flammable Skirt, which was a New York Times notable book; An Invisible Sign of My Own, which was an LA Times pick of the year; Wild Creatures, which was nominated by The Believer as one of the best books of the year; The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake, which won the SCIBA Award for Best Fiction and an Alex Award; and The Color Master, a New York Times notable book for 2013. Her latest novel, The Butterfly Lampshade, was published in July. She lives in Los Angeles with her family and teaches creative writing at USC. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And Warwick's, which, as Julie said, I would totally, go and browse in my college days. And thank you all.
Yeah.
And you that are here. These events are all different, and it feels rarer and really nice when, even if you're not showing your face, like even to just see names is really sweet. So I appreciate it. Feels more,
Right. No, absolutely. And I'll speak for Lisa for a second, but when The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake came out,
which I have right here,
she talked about this
I love this book.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I just want to get all of this in before I just freeze and can't be part of it. So love this book.
All right. Do you want me to ask, or you want?
I think you should, because it's happened. I'm sad, but it's really odd on my end, and I don't want to disrupt. So
okay,
I'll just sit here and nod and.
Well, know that Lisa. So she researched today, and I'm giving her credit. Okay. So Aimee, Publishers Weekly gave The Butterfly Lampshade a starred review, which is amazing, and said, "Rich in language and the magic of human consciousness, Bender's masterpiece is one to savor." Tell us what The Butterfly Lampshade is about.
So I'm trying to get better at this, but I'll try to do my best because it's like it's a poor strength, and like it's a weakness. That's what a poor strength is. Anyway, But it's really about a young woman, Francie, looking back at a time in her life. She's in her like mid to late 20s, and she's looking back at this transitional moment when she was 8, when her mother, who is already struggling with mental illness, has a psychotic episode and can't take care of her. And she goes to live and stay with her aunt and uncle. And she's in Portland, and she goes to Burbank. And she's sort of at this point in time where she's decided to kind of look back pretty deeply. And also there were some strange incidences that happened in that time that she wants to kind of reconsider with the distance of time and space. And so the book, in writing it, had this kind of strange pull where the past was where the real magnetic drive was in the writing process. And yet I knew it wasn't, like, it was something about the act of looking at the past that was important.
That's amazing. This is your first novel in a decade. Why did we have to wait so long after the particular sadness of lemon cake? And then she wrote these, one of her favorite books, which she also said, which is what precluded the question.
I'm so glad to hear it about the book. Well, there's a very specific reason. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that it takes me a while to sort of find a novel. Like, I don't think it's like, I don't plot it out. I'm not an outliner. And so it just takes a while to find the thing that can sustain for a certain amount of pages. And that is sometimes even just like that exploration is like a year. But my last book was a short story collection in 2013, and that was everything I had written up to that point before I had children. And I have twins who are now 7, which is the 7 years like there. So it was really a new frontier, and continues to be a new frontier about how to write while also parenting, and what kind of time did I have, and what would exploring and finding a novel look like when suddenly my sort of brain space had changed and was full of lists, of grocery lists, and all that kind of stuff in a way that was really different than it was before. So that just, that doubled the time. Ta-da. You know, it was really clear, you know?
Yeah, well, that can definitely throw a wrench in things. And I think I really like this, that you called it like as the exploration of the novel, like kind of, you know, where you're really, you know, working through what it's going to be and what it's going to look like. And I may have to steal that. I really like that. You gave an interview where you talked about how writing The Butterfly Lampshade was different from the particular sadness of Lemon Cake. Tell us about having to write in tiny chunks of time, sometimes even 10 or 15 minutes, and how this influenced the book.
Sure. Well, so early on, like for, you know, a good 6 months, I did no writing at all with these little babies. But then I kind of missed it, and I just wanted to do a tiny bit. And I think all I had was 10 minutes. So I just started setting aside 10 minutes. And the thing that was interesting is that even in 10 minutes, things can start to generate in a way that they can't in 0 minutes. And I've been quoting this friend and writer I know named Cheston Knapp, who I remember when I told about this said, 10 minutes is infinitely longer than nothing, which I loved. And I think it's true. And so even it really felt like sort of bending time to feel like here was a tiny space for imagination, really. And in that tiny space, I could just maybe get a paragraph done, but that paragraph had stuff in it that, you know, and maybe that week would get a few paragraphs done, and most of them wouldn't go anywhere, but there might be one that had like a little kernel that then I could develop. And then as they get older, the 10 minutes could become 20 minutes. And because some of the initial pages of the book are, I didn't write it in order, but there's some very short chapters, and the short chapters kind of reflect a very small writing time, because it would, like, for a while I thought the whole book would be quite short with very brief chapters. And that's also what I was reading, because that's all I had time to read. Everything had compressed, but then there began to be a little more space. And then the novel kind of expanded into, I don't know. It was no longer in the short novel framework.
Right. So you mentioned that you didn't write in order. So expand on that a little bit. And do you never write in order, or was it this particular novel, or what was that about?
Generally, I don't. I mean, short stories, I think I do write in order, and novels, no, because I just can't sustain it. Like there's something about that trajectory that is so messy since I'm not planning it. So then what I've done is all like there's an opening scene that's a dialogue between a lot of the lead players in the novel, and that didn't happen first. It happened after maybe about 6 months of just like starting to get to know the characters. But at some point I thought this could be an opening, and then I would think, well, what might come next? But this happened also with Lemon Cake, where like at some point I wrote the end of Lemon Cake just on like a regular day, and it was later looking back to realize, oh, that's the ending scene, and how does it reshuffle things if I realize this is a closing point? How does that, and then in the revision process, it becomes then a shaping. But I think drama happens for me when I'm not looking. It just doesn't happen when I'm looking. It sort of skitters away like a little lizard, and it has like the real kind of umphy stuff has to kind of creep in without me on watch. And so those scenes will happen where I'll be like, I don't know what this scene is, and then later I'll realize, oh, that's a dramatic centerpiece of the whole book.
Wow, that's really cool.
Weird.
Well, and kind of expanding on that, your writing process, and I think I might know the answer to this after hearing a couple answers, but what comes first, the plot or the characters for you?
I mean, it's, in a weird way, it's neither. And that's, I mean, I think it would, if I had to pick, I'd pick character, but I think what it ends up being is more like an image or a sentence, where it's like there'll be some sentence that I'm interested in and I don't mind rereading. I think there's something in the like rereading process. You write something and you don't know if it's good or not that day. I just don't think you can tell. And the next day, in looking back, do I enjoy rereading it? Is there a sentence in there that I'm like, that seems interesting? That to me is the only clue that I get that there's more material there. Like you can't, if something, like if art in my mind lives a little bit in an unconscious space, which it sort of has to, then I can't know where the material is off the bat. Like it's a little bit out of my awareness. So how do I find it? Well, I have to kind of look to see where something seems interesting or charged, or George Saunders talks about it as like, yeah, there's like juice or charge in a certain part of a line or whatever. So in some ways then the characters and the plot will develop from a particular image or a particular word even.
Right. So in those 5 and 10 minutes that you had, is there a particular scene or favorite scene that stands out that you created in that space that you created for yourself?
I mean,
that ended up in the book.
The opening scene felt really key because it was like, it just felt like there was a lot going on in there that I was wanting to learn about and that I didn't know the characters enough to know, but I felt like there was a lot of inherent conflict between everybody. And I guess if I go back to this idea of like a word, I kept wanting to write about the word aunt or aunt, A-U. And I was very drawn to this voice talking about her aunt and not her mother. And initially I didn't know why. So I was sort of write a scene being like, her mother is dead. And those scenes didn't work. Like her mother didn't feel dead, but I didn't know where she was. And so, but I knew that there was some relationship where there was sort of doubling of maternal characters, that it wasn't just that somehow mother felt wrong. And so anyway, so that gave me information just on a word. It was just a sort of feeling or interest in that particular word. And so that I think ultimately led to that phone conversation, which then did help me kind of feel the book in that and know that the mother was actually not well mentally and not able to take care of her anymore, and that she was going to go live with her aunt. But then what would that be like, and what would that mean, and what would that transition mean for her?
Right. Julie is agreeing. She said that the opening scene is amazing.
Thank you, Julie.
And just a reminder, you guys, if you have any questions or comments for Aimee, just put them over in the chat box and we'll definitely make sure that we ask them. So I know when we first started our writing career, my kids were really little, and I don't know if I always wrote in 10 or 15, but I was writing at the softball. I mean, I took my laptop with me everywhere. I didn't really have like a set, and I didn't have a real office. It was kind of in the middle of my house, or the dogs were in there. I didn't really have a space. Do you have like a space that's just yours that you write in, or a favorite place to write?
I do. I mean, Lemon Cake was helpful for this because it meant that there was like a little flexibility to have a space. Like, it just meant that since the book had like a little bit of a reach, I had a little spending money to make a little space that I didn't have for Lemon Cake. So that was actually, I felt there was a direct correlation that book had given me some capacity so there's a garage, and that the garage is split level, and the top of it is a little writing space and that I could know that space was there. Even when I wasn't writing, that was actually really helpful to me. So like, even when I was like, I'm not writing, but eventually I'll get to writing and that space will be there. And it was sort of a consoling thing. And there was, what was the thing that you said right before then? There was something, about the little bits of time, right? That I know, like Jennifer Egan talks about. I think it's with Visit from the Goon Squad, that she was like in labor in the car writing like edits or something amazing. I just feel like, women are amazing. And I had a teacher, Jane Vandenberg, and she would talk about just being in the tub, or the kids were in the tub and she would be like scribbling over here. So just like, what are the ways that if you're trying to do these two tasks, Tilly Olsen like just all these different ways of squeezing it in. So there was this space that did feel like it was available to me, and then ended up being really crucial as a place to leave. And had I not had that, I think I would have probably opted for the like waking up early before, like the space of time where no one's awake, because it is really hard when kids are around the house. You feel them.
Yeah.
They're on your sort of psychic mind all the time.
Well, right. I finally redid my house a couple years ago and actually got a door to my office, which was very exciting. There used to be like these 2 entry points with no door, and it's amazing. I don't know how I wrote like 4 books, or we wrote, but I was writing in that space at the same time. Yeah. I know you were there, Lisa. We've got a question here. So Christine said that the question I just asked was her question about solitude in space. And then Steve is asking, what was the initial spark idea for the story?
So I have to try to sort of think of it. I mean, I think there's a few, I guess. There's one of it was this idea of this word ant kept circling around. And usually there are many things that I sort of am thinking about, but not really aware that I'm thinking about. But I feel like I'm constantly kind of obsessed with what is this line between reality and fantasy, and what is this line between the inanimate and the animate, and what are the ways imagination can flood those spaces and mean that we can, like I had so many relationships with objects as a child. I just, like, the whole world was deeply sort of imbued with buddies, even if they were a pencil, and I see my kids doing that too. And that was just like part of life. But also trying to like put that up against what happens when you have a character whose line between reality and fantasy is actually blurry in the mother, and what happens when you have a character like Francie who's a little worried about her own darknesses and her own thoughts. And so I just sort of wanted to mush everyone in the same book, in the same world, and let them bounce off each other, because I think although the things are different, and then to have supernatural events happening that no one knows what's going on. So even though these things are very different, they can confuse each other. So it's like for Francie to have her mother have that, like that blurry line between reality and fantasy is confusing for her, for her cousin / sort of sister figure. What is that like there? So just like, what's the pinball of all these things, and where does anxiety sort of fit with this? And I think that those were the sort of deeper sparks, that there wasn't like a particular moment but I just knew that those are things that, people talk about their writerly obsessions. I think those are definitely some of mine.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Let's let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the cover of this book, because it's beautiful. Can we talk a little bit about the process? How involved or not involved were you? This is always very interesting. Lisa and I are always really curious because, I think it varies from publisher to publisher how much involvement that you are able to have.
Right. It's, I think I have like veto power, but I don't have lots of involvement. But I've learned, because with my first book, I think, I felt that I was being a lovely creative soul when I was like, I sometimes draw little pictures. Maybe I could send you something. And they were like, we have a whole department. Like it was clear that this was like a question that occasionally gets asked, and they were like, she's doing that thing. So I quickly learned to, not send them little drawings. But I love this cover. The only shift that changed was they had, and I have it here, I love and the paper is sort of pearly, and I think it has this sort of distorted beauty that I really like. But they were all purple and pink butterflies, and I asked if they could, just in case people would feel like it was too like girly. I wanted them to have some non-purple and pink. So right. that was my note. But it's a gorgeous cover. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the title, was it always the butterfly lampshade from day one?
It wasn't. It was called Schism for a long time, because I was thinking about schisms within the mind, and I was thinking about the schism, the rupture of things coming out of the lampshade, coming off of paper, like that. It's so fun to think of, Woody and Buzz Lightyear coming alive. It's so fun to imagine that. But if you really think of it happening, it's like, it is psychotic. Like, it's just like, it's terrifying. Like, it just can't work. And somehow I felt like also really obsessed with that. Like, maybe because it's not readily obvious to me, I believe so deeply that the toys have life in them, that for me, it is like, I have to work to be like, they are made out of cotton. Like, I have a little of just like, the imagination will just go a little bit overboard. So it's like, it's been a good thing for my career, but it's like, I have to really remind myself. So like of science and physics. Anyway, but so schism, I guess, has like a Catholic meaning. Does anyone know what it is?
I don't. Does anyone know on here?
I think it has some like religious, apparently it had like a little unpleasant resonance, or like there's, or maybe, I don't know, and maybe not, but that got vetoed as a title. And so then it took a while to think of it, but thinking of trying to use the word butterfly and then wanting to match the word butterfly with something maybe awkward and unpretty, because butterfly is so pretty and like they're so lovely, but it's, there's a lot of bleak parts of the book, and not wanting to be like, it's a pretty transformative book about butterflies.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Nice. He's got it. Thank you. Formal separation of a church. Great skill.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll read it for everybody. Christine saying, it's a formal separation of a church into two churches, or the secession of a group owing to doctrinal and other differences. See also Great Schism. She looked up an Apple Dictionary. Thank you. That's very helpful. Now we all know. We've all learned something.
Christine and I went to CSD together. I just have to say.
Oh, that's so cool. Hi. So you've said there's something about the sacred space of a library that felt like a place I could trust. Can you tell us more about this? And I know you didn't write this book in a library, but have there been times in your life when you've written in a library? Or what do libraries mean to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I did. There's a certain point in the writing process when I want to try to read the book from beginning to end. And that's exhausting, but I think it's really important because I want there to be an emotional movement that is an unbroken line, even if there is a through line emotionally and something can land, and that even if, you know, many people are not going to read it at once, I'm not expecting that. I want to know that it can hold together. So I have done that generally in libraries, because that feels like I need to be away from the homestead and into some other space. And I'm in LA, and for Lemon Cake, it was the Beverly Hills Library, which has these long tables and these nice lamps. And this one, it was the one by Pan Pacific Park, which has its own lovely little library space. And that was, yeah, it's really helpful. And so I think there is, I mean, libraries, of course, they're a precious place. They're a community place. They're, you know, it's tough right now, of course. They can't sort of provide the services that they tend to provide. But I think there's also a kind of wonderful anonymity. Maybe it's because there's also no commerce, you know, so you're just there in this space and you're taken away from thinking about any of that stuff, or like, you know, you're just sort of in this lending space, and that feels quiet in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to you. I'm always curious about this. I know you teach creative writing at USC. And I'm sure many of your students take your class and they're aspiring writers and ask you for advice. What advice do you give aspiring novelists?
I mean, I think it's interesting because people, there are all kinds of different questions that come in. I think maybe one that I'm trying to sort of pick, because a lot of it has to do with them trying to settle in with themselves and not sort of go towards what they think will work, because I just don't think you can know. And I think there is a sort of deep satisfaction of writing something that you feel like came out of you and no one else could have written it. That's meaningful. Whatever happens to that thing, you feel like I made this thing and I made it, you know. So some of them, like sometimes this will happen actually frequently, and I think it's relevant to this book, which is that a student will come in and have a really interesting many pages that are very like thoughtful interior. The character is walking around and sitting in a chair and eating an apple or whatever, and I'm totally with them. And you can feel the moment where the student gets anxious, and then they're like, and then Johnny ran in and said, I got hit by a car, you know, or whatever. And you're like, what? And it doesn't work, and it feels, and whenever they come into office hours and sit to talk about it, they say, well, I was worried it was boring. That's happened a lot. I've heard that a lot. And I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. Well, what do we think is boring, and what is the space created in a quiet moment? Or what David Shields talks about is like, just, it's so interesting to enter the consciousness of another person. So there was this writer who was really giving me the interior of their character. Or it doesn't have to be the interior of their character, it just often is that case. And then feels the need to sort of like make it really actiony.
Right.
And I have no problem with an actiony book that wants to be actiony. I think it's like, I see though much more often a quieter book that suddenly feels the pressure to do that. And I think so that then it's just like trying to push them towards the book they're actually writing, the scene, the story, the thing they're making, as opposed to what they think they should do.
Right. Absolutely. And that's really interesting. And I think you're right. I think they do get, there's like, I got to move this along. But I think sometimes when people are really great at that, like getting inside the head and that sort of narrative, it's really just beautiful. We have a question from Karen. Hi, Aimee. I'm wondering how teaching creative writing has affected your writing or not. I guess it has been 20 years since I sat in your classroom, and yet I often hear your voice in my head as I write and edit. Love, Karen Thompson Walker.
Oh, so nice. Karen, I saw your name, Karen Walker, and I thought, I wonder if that's the Karen Walker I know. That is. Hello, Karen Thompson Walker. Awesome novelist. So when she was a young UCLA student, I taught her. Oh, yeah, nice. She's probably come to Warwick. So in terms of teaching, I mean, I'm so glad, first of all, Karen, I'm so glad you say that. And I think the thing that teaching does the most is it's like, you sort of, I think, end up teaching the thing that is central to you as a writer. Like, it's both the thing I feel like I can teach and I can give to my students, but it's also the thing I need to hear over and over again. So I think there's a way that in teaching the students, I'm reminding myself constantly about what is kind of my value what do I believe in? I feel like a writing teacher has a kind of moral stance about the work that they're doing. And it's like an ethic about what writing is and what it can do and what it's for. And so when you're up there doing it, it sort of, it keeps a person honest in that way. So if my student is coming in with their quiet story and I'm like, this part doesn't look good, when the guy runs in saying he just got in a car accident, I don't believe it. It does let me gain a little confidence to be like, okay, that scene, I'm starting to worry that it's boring. I mean, clearly, I put my main characters sitting there having memories. So I'm taking a lot of that from what I learned from reading student work, where I was like, I'm perfectly happy. Just like walking around with a character, I am perfectly happy if the writing's interesting. And then to trust that with myself. So I think it does feel like I gained some faith in the process through that. And I also, it's socially really fun, I think, to talk about writing, with people who value it.
Yeah, that must be really rewarding.
It is so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question here. From Giselle, she's saying creativity can often be stifled by anxiety. How do you foresee this pandemic anxiety impacting students and helping them to get to the creative space they need?
Giselle, thank you. School starts a week from tomorrow. USC does, and I am thinking on this question right now. So you're going to help me articulate it a little bit. So I appreciate that. But one thing, I was looking up creativity and limits. I think there is a lot of anxiety right now, and obviously we're all very limited in our options. And I also think creativity tends to do well with limits. So one thing is, I was finding there's a sculptor who does, he calls it a sort of Tetris game, where he sort of puts objects inside between buildings, and he has to find the right object to match. And so it's like a couch, a shelf, board or whatever. And it just looks really bizarre, but it's this wonderful, he's very limited by the space between buildings, and he uses that to make a kind of surprising combination of objects. So I think part of that is to think about, within these limitations, what are the ways that the creative work can actually thrive? And within the anxiety in writing is normal. And it's, I think, very true that people's concentration is thin right now. And I think that's true. And maybe shorter writing times is better for that. And having deadlines is helpful for that. Like, all these things that can create structure around what feels like a very long and uncertain and long and uncertain time. So to create within that little miniature structures, I think can help creatively a lot. So I think we'll be doing a lot of things like that. Like, I'll be giving assignments, and they'll be doing assignments, and I'm gonna be just talking about that idea a lot. And yeah.
I think I want to take your class now. Is it too late to apply to USC? Sounds really good. I'm in.
You're in.
I'm going to get the Zoom password and just sneak on. I'm going to be one of those hackers.
Right, totally. You can Zoom on. I'm here with my pad.
Right. I can put a really bad background in back or something, something obnoxious. So what have been some of your, kind of talking about quarantine, what have you read in quarantine that you've really liked? Anything unusual, anything really special?
I've been reading lots of different things and really enjoying them. The main thing, and actually I could even, there's another quote in there that I found yesterday, but there's a public space is doing these book clubs, and the writer Yi-Yun Lee is did War and Peace, but it was supposed to be 3 months, and I'm still, every time people ask me what I'm reading, I'm still reading War and Peace because it's so big. But there's a beautiful line that I just read yesterday, just about how anything, when given attention and concentration, has this kind of depth in it. So if you can, you can find, I also think that's really important, that students, when they're sitting down to write, you don't have to sit down and say, I'm going to write about something serious and important. if you put attention and focus on absolutely anything, you will, and you go underneath it, there's worlds beneath that, if you really listen to your own interests. So, so War and Peace is one. I'm also reading, this is what's nice, I actually have my nightstand right here.
Oh, great.
The Fire This Time, which is an anthology sort of renewal of The Fire Next Time. This is put together by Jesmyn Ward, a wonderful anthology. I just got this new book of poems called Pricks in the Tapestry, which by Jameson Fitzpatrick. I read a couple of his poems online, and they were so moving. A poem in which nothing bad ever happens to me. I mean, it's just like, already you can sort of feel the weight of that. So those are the couple things that I'm reading right at this moment. But, you know, reading time is a little tough to find, but always doing a little bit at a day.
Right.
Very.
And what, I know we had a book just come out in the last month, and you know, we at the beginning of the year with our publicity team was, you know, we were imagining this whole, you know, coast to coast tour, and then we were on a bunch of Zooms, which was great too. We were able to reach a lot of people we couldn't. So what does that look like for you? Like, what has your COVID launch looked like?
I know it is strange, right? It's like it's a very different thing. But you said yours was last month?
Yeah, July 14th. Yeah.
Okay. So very similar. Yeah. And I mean, I think in some ways it was probably a lot harder for those who, you know, it was March and April, because everyone was trying to figure it out, same way like the grocery stores. It's just so, by the time July rolled around, I feel like the publicity department really had a handle on making these connections to bookstores, and how were they going to do it, and getting me the books to sign so that UPS could come and bring them to the bookstore, and then the bookstore can get them to read, you know, like that is all moving along pretty seamlessly. And it's definitely strange. But it's the same thing as the 10 minutes, right? I still feel like even with people's faces blacked out, like seeing things in the chat, or like getting, like, it still feels like there's contact and connection that gets made.
Right.
So it's not the same. It's certainly not the same, but it counts. So I think.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we have time for one more question, and we have one in the audience. Christine is asking, as a reader, who inspires you as an author?
Many writers. I get regular inspiration still, this is just many years along, from Haruki Murakami, because of the way I feel like he just takes his time exploring, like going back to this exploring idea. He's just models exploring. And I almost feel like the exploring is the most interesting part to me, as opposed to anything he finds. I just want to be in the journey. Like, I just find the journey really interesting. And I think he really trusts that. And I was talking to someone earlier about Marilyn Robinson's book, Housekeeping, and also Gilead and Home, and just all her novels feel like there's so much substance. James Baldwin, speaking of The Fire Next Time, someone that like the depth is just shattering. Like there's just such deep seeing. I feel that with Marilyn Robinson too. Like I feel like the two of them are just seeing so deeply and intensely into people and into society. So, and then also just like Angela Carter, who writes transformed fairy tales and has this lushness of language. I love her. I love poets. I love reading different kinds of poetry. I like things when they're a little skewed in some way. Someone like Kafka, of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Anyway, so I could go on and on. But I think it's always like something has to be a little odd. But that oddness can be a kind of, supernatural depth that I see in certain writers, where they're just, you're like, what are they, like, what is their visionary kind of capacity? Or it can be the strangeness of a skewed world, or it can be, all these things.
Right. That's so interesting. All right. So we are out of time, but why don't you tell us where everybody can find you online? Your website. Are you on you're on the socials too?
I'm
right?
on Twitter is the only one I'm on sort
right.
of with any, I'm sort of, yeah. The other ones I sort of lurk a little bit, but I don't really do much. But Twitter at Aimee Bender is me on Twitter, and I tweet a little bit and retweet happily, and all of that. And then I have a website, aimeebender.com. And I'm going to try to keep better tabs on putting up a writing exercise every month. So there's a section for that. So first of the month, there'll be a new writing exercise on that.
Oh, almost as good as me crashing your Zoom class. I'll go do the writing class.
Little mini version of that.
It's very exciting. Well, it was such a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for your time. And Julie, I'm going to throw it over to you.
There you go. Aimee, thank you. And the people that inspire you and writing depth of character, that's how we feel about how you write, because your characters are amazing. And your stories and the little bit of odd, the butterflies, we adore you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, it was, I mean, talking about anxiety and everybody just needs to read this book. And we do have signed copies. So we were talking about the signed copies. Yes, these are signed. They're at the store. Liz and Lisa, we can't thank you guys enough for always doing these great events. And like you said, Aimee, too, I love these Zoom rooms because they do have a little bit more of an intimacy than just talking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do. So thank everybody for coming, and we'll see everybody next time.
We'll see you next time. Thanks again, Aimee.
Julie, and all of you.
Thank you. Bye.